play.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time it is in the world, wherever you are tuning in from. But I will say this, it's Saturday, the 12th of December, and I have watched a lot of Gill Gross's episodes that have gone out on YouTube ever since he did a vlog from the French Open 2019, Gill?
Yes.
Cool. And there was one occasion when my ears pricked up, but Gill will be surprised by this because I've not forewarned him, and it has nothing to do with tennis. I recall him once suggesting that he had leanings towards Liverpool Football Club. Am I right, Gill?
No, you're not exactly correct. I was gifted I suppose a scarf, a Liverpool scarf, and I had that in the back of my studio. So that's probably why you thought that was the case. But it was just a gift. Somebody decided to give me that scarf, and I thought it was a nice enough scarf to put behind me.
So I picked up on that, and I've forgotten all the other tennis analysis over the last 4 years, but I got that, even if it was slightly fake news. But anyway, Vansh, how are you doing today?
Awesome. I've also followed Gill's stuff quite a bit and known him for 3 or 4 years now, so it should be fun to dive right into this awesome tennis match.
And it is an awesome one indeed. Yeah. Gill, I've got this match, by the way. I unilaterally decided the final 7 order. It was done collectively, that we sort of whittled it down. I say collectively, a mixture of some of the Talking Tennis community, a few Twitter polls, and finally we got it down to 7 ATP matches and also 7 WTA. But at that point, I took it on board and became a dictator and just went, right, this is the order we're doing it in, and this is what I think is number 1 and 2, because that's where I guess any potential controversy might come in. Because I went for this one at number 2, and and therefore you can probably guess which one was at number 1. Do you disagree with me, Gill?
So, no, I have it the same way. I do the Monday Match Analysis Awards every year, and I have to pick a match of the year, an ATP match of the year, and this was not it. I went with probably the one you have at number 1, which is the Wimbledon final. I got to say, John, just going back and looking at this match and everything that went down, I did start to second guess myself just a little bit. I mean, it's over and done with. It's the Wimbledon final. That's the match of the year for Monday Match Analysis. But in a lot of ways, this was more thrilling and entertaining, the match itself, right? Obviously, you give the nod to Wimbledon because it was Wimbledon. You know, it was a major final, and that gives it a massive boost. So you can't really argue with that. But this match was very, very, very special in Cincinnati.
Vansh, you were there, right?
I was, yeah. I was there all week, and the build up to this match before the final, I mean, you can just imagine the hype that was circulating around the grounds. And I've never heard more oohing and eyeing from people in the press room than I was when I was watching, especially the third set of this match. I think that if we're rating like individual sets, we can talk about this a bit later, but I think that third set has to be the best set all year in terms of just sheer quality, drama, the amount of twists and turns. I mean, the roller coaster ride that you were on while watching this, and each time you thought a player had the upper hand and had the momentum, it was just taken right out of his hands. And you just didn't know which way it was going at any point.
It wasn't the deciding factor, Gil, but it was a factor that made me put this at number 2, which was also that it could have, and from Alcaraz's camp's perspective, should have been a fairly non-event. In fact, I heard the commentary just now, midway through the second set, and I must quote the commentary, which was more or less the words to this effect: "Not the match we were hoping for, not the match that it had the potential to be." Famous last words, of course, but we'll get to that juncture shortly. But yeah, Gil, it was also that point that just another reason, but the main factor was the Wimbledon, star rating that put this one at number 2. But let's get into sort of how they arrived at the final. I mean, Djokovic was fairly serene. I didn't think he was playing amazingly well. I remember him losing to beating David Fokina, but David Fokina was a bit lame. And in fact, until that injury, I thought it was nip and tuck, albeit that Novak's prowess was probably always going to win out. I think Taylor Fritz, a real beatdown for Taylor, and Zverev was a bit closer, but still, Novak being Novak, hardcore, North America, blah, 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 Cincinnati as well. Carlos, on the other hand, had a pretty bumpy ride to the final. Special moments, pulling rabbits out of hats as only he can, dropping sets, though, left, right, and center, saving a match point, I believe, against Hurkacz, and one that perhaps Hurkacz looks back on and perhaps could have won that point. Some match. Some match points, and we're going to come to one shortly, was sort of just not winnable, but that was a winnable match point for Hurkacz. What were your thoughts going into the final, Gil? Did you have Novak as a favorite or Carlos, or what were you thinking?
Yeah, I did. I mean, so there was a couple of factors coming in. Novak hadn't played since Wimbledon. Excuse me. That is a pretty long layoff. So, you thought that maybe you wouldn't get 100% Novak, but then by the time he gets to the final, he has tennis under his belt and he's looking a lot better than Alcaraz, who, it just felt like he was on the back foot a lot on his way to the final. He played a lot of really good net rushers, right? Jordan Thompson, great net rusher. Max Purcell in the quarters, great net rusher, as are, Tommy Paul and Hubert Hurkacz. And they were coming forward and attacking Alcaraz with a lot of success, and making him uncomfortable. And it felt also like Carlitos was not playing consistently on the forehand. That shot had gone cold on him. And it was kind of similar to what we saw in Canada. So you look at Canada and then all the matches in Cincinnati and Alcaraz's resume since Wimbledon, it's like, where is an easy win? He's having to struggle each and every match. Now, he was showing a lot of impressive qualities mentally, John, just to continue to win these matches. But undoubtedly, Djokovic was looking better heading into the final. And then if you look at the conditions, the weather conditions, which I'm sure we'll talk about, you also start to consider, well, Alcaraz is playing all of these 3-set matches. Djokovic is winning in straights. It's going to be oppressive conditions on the Sunday. That puts Alcaraz at a disadvantage physically.
Okay. Vansh, Djokovic draws first blood, interestingly, because actually I think it's one of those that historically could get forgotten even, because, we think about this having 2 or 3 swings, but we assume that the first one is in the favor of Carlos, certainly with time. But actually, it's Novak who draws blood first, breaking for 4-2. And then, but fortunately for Carlos, he breaks immediately back. Vansh, were you in the stadium at this point or the press room, or were you sort of going between the two?
Yeah, so the vantage point that I had was at the top of the stadium. So,
Okay.
still, it's not a huge stadium, so it's tightly packed, and I would just kind of walk in between inside the press room and then right outside on the very top stairs. But at this point, the oppressive conditions were very evident. I mean, it was 95, 100 degrees the players were really feeling it on the court, especially Novak at this point. The sun just beating down really hard, and yeah, I remember that game that Djokovic played De Broek. He had this really good forehand inside in winner, I believe, to convert the break, and but you sort of felt like Alcaraz, was kind of playing like he was all week, like he was just a little bit just not consistent enough from the back of the court, and Djokovic didn't have to do a whole lot to earn that break besides that one forehand inside in winner. But at this point, you could really see that you could see it on his face, like he was just really feeling it physically, like the heat. We haven't really seen the heat get to Djokovic in a way, in quite some years. I mean, at least the last 5 or 6 years, it hasn't really been it hasn't really stopped him from winning a lot. But in this occasion, you really felt like, if Alcaraz can just get right back into this, make this physical, you felt like he was going to have a shot at potentially outlasting Novak in a lot of rallies, and you just felt like, yeah, now this set could go either way, and it was Alcaraz who looked the stronger.
Just quickly though on that break, there was a great image of Carlos. This is the break against Carlos I'm referring to, with him just desperately stretching every sinew available to try and get his racket on it. And so often we see that, and he gets his racket on it, and it comes back with interest. But even Carlos Alcaraz can't get his racket on this one. And it was almost like a goalkeeper desperately trying to get their hands on the ball, and still he couldn't do it. And Novak managed to hit through him on that occasion. But as I highlighted, Carlos breaks back quite quickly. We then get to 4-all and then 5-all. I've got a sumptuous volley here in my notes from Novak at 4-all and deuce. So Novak really very quickly after that break is actually hanging on to his serve more often than not. And indeed, Carlos does eventually break at 6-5. Probably no major turning points that really as such. We're going to come to a much bigger one midway through the second set. But I guess now any sort of pre-match thoughts, Gill, of Novak being the favorite, or Novak maybe surviving slightly better in the conditions, were being thrown out the window.
Yeah, exactly. Again, a lot of talk coming into the match about who was going to hold up better physically, especially because that was the deciding factor in their Roland Garros semifinal earlier in the year. And it was Alcaraz malfunctioning physically. The thing is, I guess I'd say the talking point after the first set was, look, it doesn't matter how good your fitness is if you have not experienced that kind of heat yet. And again, Novak hadn't played since Wimbledon, and it hadn't been that hot in Cincinnati until this day. There's really no preparing for it other than, again, being in it. This is why players train in Florida. This is why a lot of players get a taste of it, in Washington, D.C., right, where it's often really, really hot and steamy. Mm-hmm. And now the body acclimatizes, and it just seems, to Vanch's point, we know that Novak is in terrific condition, but it was almost like, well, there's no conditioning for this kind of heat and humidity. And I see what I wrote in my notes watching live at 4-2. I said Novak looked a little sick in this game. After 4-all, yeah, Djokovic held, but I said this is Djokovic hanging on by a thread physically, just staying tough. So I was impressed by the fight, but ultimately, yeah, there was just a disparity in the ability to withstand the heat and humidity between the two players. And when the first set went to Alcaraz, the question really was, can Novak turn around his physical state?
And Carlos is now in the midst of actually a pretty good run in terms of games. I think he wins 9 out of 12 spanning across those two sets, because he also gets a break fairly early in the second set. And it still felt like there was a little bit of work to be done yet. But, the finishing line was getting closer and closer, and none more so than at 4-2. There's also this moment as well around this time, I think, when we see Novak with the cold towels around his neck and getting some sort of treatment or some attention at least for his ailments. And it's really, really looking a long, long way back for Novak, because even if he was miraculously to get back into this set, the conditions at this exact moment, and Vansh, you were obviously there, so you'll be able to flesh this one out. You know, it was just looking very difficult for Novak. And in fact, there's even a moment at 4-2 love 15, or what becomes love 15, because of an unbelievable lob from Carlos. And there was 2 or 3 sumptuous ones from him, 1 or 2 that just went out, but still kind of looked good, even if they didn't quite land in. And you just thought, you know what, his radar's not far off. And there was one unbelievable one. And at 4-2, love 15. And so therefore, you know, 2 or 3 points, or 3 points away from a double break. I'm just looking at Novak on the replays just now and thinking, wow, this looks like a beaten Novak Djokovic, someone that we rarely see, because even in some of those sort of humbling defeats he's had at Monte Carlo, you know, it's okay. There's 2 months to the French Open, and these things happen, especially as you switch surfaces at that time of the year. But this was looking, on the back of the Wimbledon loss as well, it was looking pretty troubling. Vansh, tell us about your thoughts on this moment of the match. And also, we are going to see some weather conditions change, right? Am I right?
Yeah, especially towards the end of the second set. But what I would say is at 1-1, I mean, Djokovic, this was a very surprising moment for me. He threw in 3 double faults in that game, and you just don't see that very often. And Carlos had to do very little to get that break, essentially. And at this point, at 4-2, when Alcaraz hits that lob, and it's love 15, and Djokovic is serving, I'm thinking, how much is Djokovic willing to dig in here? Because the U.S. Open is right around the corner. You know, it's about 8 days away. Is he going to want to give it his all in another Masters 1000 final that he's won twice in Cincinnati before, or is he going to, you know, is Alcaraz going to lose his focus essentially, and is he going to play a sloppy game? Because at that point, I remember thinking Carlos has got this, but he's got to stay disciplined and not get sloppy, and the forehand has to be firing. So, and we found that out at 4-3 when Alcaraz just this was the one bad game from him in this match, you know, where he just I believe four unforced errors in a row. I mean, just kind of just gifted Djokovic a second wind at this point. And this was around the time when you felt like conditions were starting to change, and it was starting to get a little bit more breezy, and the temperature maybe dropped from 95 to around 87, 86, and you felt like, okay, the wind is starting to pick up. It's not as hot anymore, and Djokovic looks like he has a second wind. And now this match is going to be a war, and that's what happened.
Gill, I spoke to Carlos in Barcelona at a press conference there, and I was particularly intrigued to know what the difference was between April 2023 and April 2022, because I noticed a stark contrast in the way he was winning matches in Barcelona in 22 and how he's winning them in 23, sometimes against the same opponents, such as Stefanos Tsitsipas, as in he was doing them miraculously, 3 sets, you know, being a double breakup, then it coming back, and then blah, 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 and it just being a battle, but also unbelievable Carlos, and he did win that tournament in 2022. So I was thinking to myself in my head, I'm going to ask him. He's going to probably tell me, or I hope he tells me, you know, he's going to say, well, I've worked on my serve, and I've done this, and I've done that, and I think I'm a better player in all departments or whatever. But he didn't say that. He just said simply this.
El año pasado has perdido 3 sets antes de la victoria. Este año, 0 sets. El año pasado, incluido contra Tsitsipas, la diferencia fue muy fino. Este año fue más cómodo, 2 sets. ¿Cuál fue la diferencia? ¿Has mejorado?
Bueno, el año pasado recuerdo que iba bastante cómodo, iba a set 4-1, 4-2 arriba, iba la verdad que controlado, el partido estaba más o menos controlado y me despisté un poco. Yo diría que la diferencia del año pasado a hoy es que he mantenido la concentración durante todo el partido, desde el principio hasta el final. No he dejado que Stefanos dominara en ningún momento y he impuesto mi ritmo durante todo el partido. Así que la diferencia ha estado en lo mental, en que no he bajado ni una pizca la concentración.
Concentration. I now, when I'm up a break, I don't let that one go, if you like, as he had done in Barcelona before. And yet, we did just see a little bit in the French Open, I remember, against Stefanos Tsitsipas in the 3rd set there, when I think, because he said on his on-court interview, because he let Tsitsipas back into that 3rd set, he ultimately wins it in straight sets, and, you know, it doesn't really become much of a thing. But when he says on court that he lost a bit of concentration in the 3rd set, of course, my mind goes back to Barcelona. Was it simply that in Cincinnati, or am I being a bit too simplistic?
No, I think it was that. And, frankly, we can go through a long list of Alcaraz matches from Wimbledon on where I couldn't give him an A in the concentration department, especially if you look at second sets, which tended to be a problem for him in most of his losses after Wimbledon, where he lost a lot of second sets. Some of them were lopsided even because he did have that lapse usually early in the second set. Yeah, this was a moment where clearly he kind of let his foot off the gas, and it wasn't just the 4-3 game. It really started at 2-4 where things started to go haywire. And I can tell you this, from 2-4 to 4-all, the unforced errors were Alcaraz 7, Djokovic 2. And the other points Djokovic won were service winners. So Novak got back into this match, back into this second set, two ways: unforced errors by Alcaraz and some service winners. He did not have to win a single point another way. So if you're Alcaraz, you have to at least make him earn it. You have to make him come up with something. He didn't here. So it was a really rough patch. And it's something that is, I guess a lot of people have been like, Alcaraz has no weaknesses. Where's the weakness? And you look from a technical standpoint and you can't find one. But this is definitely one area, I'd say, going into next year where Alcaraz, he shows his age, he shows how he's 20 years old, and it's something that should get better and will need to get better on his end.
I think also maybe reinvigorated by what was going on the other side of the net, Novak does start to produce some of his best tennis as we head into that second set tiebreak. However, Novak still has to save a match point. Vansh, what are your memories of that inflection point?
The match point was well saved by Djokovic. It was a serve +1, forehand inside in, and not really much Alcaraz could really do there on the match point save. But I guess it's the points afterwards that start getting really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We sometimes have said with Hurkacz in the semi-finals and many other match points that have slipped away from players over the years, there are some regrets perhaps. But on this one, there was not much Alcaraz could do. Although I still thought, watching it today, I still thought Novak had to still sort of, maybe heart in the mouth stuff for his fans, but his heart wasn't in his mouth as he just sort of coolly put it away. And then, of course, we get a set point, or actually, do we get 1 or 2 set points for Novak? We certainly get at least one because obviously he ends up winning it 9-7, I believe, that tiebreak. What are your thoughts at this point, Gill?
Well, at 6-all, he served and volleyed behind his second serve, which is it's not a play I generally think is effective. And Alcaraz hit this great dipping low return, and Djokovic comes up with an amazing backhand volley cross court. The first volley was really the exceptional volley, set up a second volley that he was able to finish. So I thought that was a big turning point. And I don't know even what to make of Novak's decision-making in that moment, but he saved it with his volley skills, which we also saw at the U.S. Open in the final against Medvedev a couple weeks later. And then, I mean, at 7-all, Novak came up with a great return that had some heat on it. I don't think Alcaraz should have missed the forehand, but he made an unforced error, slightly rushed on the +1 forehand. That set up the set point, and then Djokovic plays a really, really steady point on this set point where Alcaraz really threw a lot of great variety his way, did a lot of things trying to attack Novak's backhand variation of heights, and in classic Novak fashion, he just didn't give up really anything short, anything attackable, and ultimately got the miss when Alcaraz tried to attack with his backhand, and he dumped it in the net.
Djokovic levels the match. I don't know how he's done it, but he's done it.
Sorry, Carlos blinks first is my note at that point, as he often does, but often with great success. But on this occasion, he puts that backhand, I think it was, into the net. And now it's advantage Djokovic almost, Vansh. Is it, or am I getting carried away at this point? It's just, I mean, I guess I probably thought advantage Djokovic a few times in his matches with Alcaraz, whether they were in Madrid or Wimbledon. And actually, Alcaraz was bigger and stronger than I probably underestimated the Spaniard. And we're going to come to some other moments in the match shortly. But yeah, with those temperatures dropping, Djokovic seems reinvigorated. And of course, at this point, Vanch, we have a slightly unusual image for a guy who's still relatively new to the tour, but we've been watching him now for the best part of 3 years, I think it is, on the tour. And we're now seeing Carlos really angry at this end of the second set. I think he's punching something nearby that's sort of plastic-ish. But I'm worried for him. And in fact, I think he did do a bit of damage to his hand at this point. And I think that may have required treatment. But he was clearly very annoyed with how that second set panned out.
Yeah, it was a combination of things. It was, of course, the poor game that he played at. That poor stretch that Gill referenced from 2-4 to 5-4. And also just knowing that, this match was his and he let it slip in that one moment. And he starts hitting his hand against the side of his chair, and he needs to get treatment on it because at this point he was just venting out, and it was probably in some ways not the most healthiest way to do it, but at the same time he let out quite a lot of steam, and maybe it also energized him a little bit for what was going to be a really fantastic third set. But actually going back to the tiebreak at 6-all, and also the set point against Medvedev later, a lot of people were saying Alcaraz and Medvedev should have gone down the line on the pass, and Djokovic always anticipates these things really, really well, and he just sort of stays home, and he, most of his opponents are kind of playing a little bit of a mind game there at this point, like, should I go cross, should I go line? And the line seems easy and open, but they often think like, oh, Djokovic is going to cover line, so I might as well just go cross and try to trick him. And Djokovic just always so ready and anticipates that backhand volley in the open court both times, and we've seen this so many times.
Yeah, he's actually what some people don't realize is Novak's movement in both of those moments is actually the surprising movement. So he's catching he's catching his opponent by surprise by not covering down the line. So, everybody who looks at that and thinks it's obvious to go line there, that they're just not quite understanding what they're seeing, where Novak can go to cover the open court. He's expected to, and he doesn't. That's the surprising wrinkle. And that's why he gets set up with that easy backhand volley. So well said, Vanch.
By the way, ridiculous how Alcaraz almost even got to the open volley. Like, he got his racket on it and basically fell on the floor. I was like, that I just could not believe it. Why would you even bother chasing that down? But wow, like he's and then also the 7-all point. I thought Djokovic did a really good job of hanging in, because that whole time, at least 3 or 4 times, I thought Alcaraz had the advantage because he was hitting really heavy with his forehand, and he was having a lot of success in this match at times, hitting his forehand down the line really big and forcing Djokovic to kind of hit his backhand above his shoulder, because this court is like still pretty lively and bouncy, kind of like when they played in Madrid. So he was having a lot of, his forehand was doing a lot of damage in the heaviness category, but I felt like Djokovic was still able to get a pretty decent amount of width on his cross-court backhands and just make Alcaraz hit backhands all day. And, on the set point, finally, Alcaraz was the first to blink, and he tried to go down the line. And that had to have been really frustrating, because that really sucked the soul out of him in some way, having to play, I think, was a 23-shot rally or something like that. And I remember thinking at time, it's going to be tough to recover from something like that, just mentally.
Yeah, but also it signaled that Novak's fitness was back. Like that takes great shot tolerance in order to stay in a rally like that. And I think going into the third set, like, it was very clear that the storyline that prevailed for the first set and a half, starting from 4-2 in the first set, of Djokovic not being being right physically, that was going to be a thing of the past. There was no concern heading into the third about Djokovic's legs anymore.
Gill, I thought it was very interesting during that interview with John Wertheim last week when Novak said sometimes he has a quick look up at the screen to see what's going on with his opponent as he's sitting down, like in the changeovers. So I'm wondering what Novak, because I think, did he stay on the court? I don't know if he left the court when Carlos was punching the chair or whatever. But either way, I'm pretty sure that Novak would have been aware of what was going on. I wonder what he thought of his opponent's frustrations, because actually a lot of people who play Novak, if they're sort of much further down the tennis food chain, if you like, probably don't have unbelievable expectations. So when the match gets away from them, they probably don't get as stressed as this. Not all players are like this, but I'm wondering what Novak was making of his opponent's potential frailties at this point, because I thought that was an interesting comment he made to John last week.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm not sure if Novak saw it. I didn't blame. Now, I do think Vansh is right. You got to be careful with the right hand when you're letting out your frustration. Yeah. I mean, that is your instrument of necessity. So you do have to be careful. But I couldn't blame Alcaraz. I mean, it was bad. He should have been in the locker room. Actually, he should have been in the trophy presentation, I should say. So I didn't blame him for being, really frustrated. Another thing that Novak said in the 60 Minutes interview is that it's okay to feel emotion, and it's okay to get negative as long as you let it pass, as long as you reset and move on. Yeah. Novak kind of rejected the idea that mental strength is staying positive. So I thought that was very insightful as well. I guess to start the third set, this is a point in the match where I guess memories can become less vivid because of what happened later on in the third set. But it's the level seemed to be pretty high from Alcaraz. The trouble was Djokovic was right there with him.
Yeah.
I was worried, though, actually, Gill. So, in fact, after this outburst, if you want to call it that, from Carlos, I thought, listen, Carlos needs to get a couple of holds in, get a couple of holds of serve. And if you're a Carlos fan and they offer you 2-2 or 3-3 at this point, probably take it, because this could easily be a 6-1 set and it's done. But he got to 3-3. And so having got to 3-3, although it wasn't easy, and as you said, Gil, the quality from both players was now very high. So Carlos hadn't been as distracted by the physical release, if you like, or if anything, that did manage to get him back on track, because those first 6 games weren't easy, but he did get to 3-3. And once at 3-3, I thought, okay, now we're much closer to 50-50 than I thought 20 minutes prior, when I was pretty sure now that Novak was going to go on and win the match. However, at 3-3, my tennis analysis, we could call it Friday afternoon analysis rather than Monday match analysis, because it was pretty lame, because it got to 3-3, and in fact, Novak is the one who does end up breaking Vanch. I mean, at this point now at 4-3, and then of course we get the match points. I think Novak gets 2 at 3-5 on the Carlos serve. It's the second one, of course, that we probably have most vivid memories of. The first one, actually, I can't remember right now, but the second one is kind of insane, because actually Carlos is from memory, I have just seen it, but I think Carlos is kind of up in that rally, but somehow loses that advantage and then gets so far behind in the rally with 2 shots from Novak. One, I think, is forcing him out wide on the backhand side where he's struggling to get it. Novak does exactly what he has to do with the volley, but Carlos manages to not only chase it down, produce just a sensational winner. And probably this is the point, this exact point. Maybe it's like, oh, we're watching something pretty special now. This is now got to a point. So even if Novak ends up winning that game, or Novak ends up serving it out, we're still now elevating this match. And I think that match point save, it then went from being a very good match to being one of the top 2 of the year at the very least, Vansh.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is when the match really ignited, and just kind of highlight reel after highlight reel. Just there were so many times in this match from this point on where you're like, you were at a loss of words, really. I mean, yeah, even the first match point to come up with the servant volley there, I thought was pretty bold. Pulled it off, and then the second one, yeah, I mean, just ridiculous, because when he goes for that forehand drop shot, you're thinking, and when Djokovic gets there, you're thinking, oh, this is trouble, because Djokovic got there very quickly. It was super explosive, hits a perfect approach cross court. It's deep, and even the volley against most players that would have been enough, that forehand angle volley that he hits, but perhaps he didn't cut it just fine enough, taking into account Alcaraz's speed, but you can't blame him at all, because it's still a fantastic volley, and Alcaraz somehow gets there and finds the space down the line. You could not, you just could not believe what you were seeing at that moment. And you figured if Alcaraz could just get out of this game, Djokovic was going to have to answer real questions, because at this point, he was also, I think, 1 for 7 or 1 for 6 or something like that on break points. So he was getting chances, but he wasn't his usual self in terms of converting them. So at this point, you're thinking, yeah, I mean, he still has to serve this match out. If Alcaraz does come up with some magic here, this could carry him in the next game. And so, pretty key points.
It just became a match where it was hard to count the number of twists and turns, because you were at different points positive that one player or the other player was going to win the match, and you kept on being wrong about it. And that's a really fun way for a tennis match to play out. So yeah, it's special, Alcaraz stuff that, with the scrambling and the athleticism and the shot making in combination. When you see that stuff to save match point, you just know that you're looking at something that is going to be enjoyed by millions and millions and millions of people all around the world. And that was pretty cool to have in the moment, especially because, these matches, and it's true for all of these Djokovic Alcaraz matches, they are hyped up beforehand as well. You know that everybody's watching. And when they deliver in this way, as they did, at least twice this year, it's really, really special.
Yes, and deliver it certainly did. And as I say, I think this is the moment when it just sort of went into another stratosphere. And I guess I still thought Novak would serve it out, but he didn't, Vansh. What are your thoughts on the game at 5-4 as it would have been? Do you think Novak might have been affected at all by what he was seeing on the other side of the net? Do you think Novak serves that out against 99% of the tour? But actually, he's maybe even the great Novak might have been slightly rattled by just seeing. I mean, he said in his speech afterwards, and he was definitely talking about the match point save. Novak said in the speech afterwards, "You guys just don't give up," And I think he even said it. He might have said it was on match point. It's like, you could have just done that, and we could have all gone home 45 minutes ago. I don't know. And Novak, only he probably could tell us if those match point saves, and especially that incredible one, had any kind of reasoning behind him then not serving it out.
Yeah, for sure. And this was also a big thing, because I remember thinking at that time, like, Djokovic also got really tight when he was serving out his semifinal against Zverev, and he was he should have gone off the court and won that like 7-6, 6-4, but then he ended up double faulting a couple of times, and actually, because it was the first time really since Wimbledon, that tournament, that he sort of was up against it in terms of quality players in the later rounds. And so but at this point, it was more just about just the tension in the arm and serving out another big title against a big rival, who at this point, Alcaraz still, he has the Wimbledon final won. So it's, Djokovic still has some work here to do to get over this mentally, but also just physically. Alcaraz was right there with him in this game. And but actually, it did really surprise me on one of the match points when he double faulted. I wasn't expecting it at that point, but that was just another sign that he was really feeling the nerves, and he is human in some of these moments, even though he's been in this situation over and over. But yeah, I mean the match point save by Alcaraz, the forehand down the line winner. At that point, I mean that's the place just exploded at that point. I remember just like I was sitting next to Miney watching this match from The Guardian, and I
Okay,
mean
he
we
was
were
in
both
Cincinnati.
just
Okay.
yeah, we were both just so in awe of what we were seeing. We weren't even processing it quite at this point. Like you'd have to go back and rewatch the highlights to really to really understand, because everything was just happening so fast at that point, and you're just trying to wrap your head around all the amazing athleticism.
I think it was about 2 or 3 in the morning in Germany on German time, but I was wide awake. But the mind was frazzled. My mind
Yeah.
was frazzled. More in terms of just predictions have to go out the window at this point, because I think I'd had about 5 different changes of mind, and they'd all had to be reversed at one point or another. So I think I'd given up on that at 5-all and was very much enjoying what I was seeing. I actually don't have many clear memories of the 2 holes of serve that then meant us to go to a tiebreak. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on
I
those
remember the
2
5-all game was pretty epic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think there were like at least
There's
3
a break point.
points.
There are 2, I believe. No, there were
okay.
3. There were 3.
Because
And
but the only one I really remember is the serve and volley on the third one.
Okay.
Because,
This is a Novak
Alcaraz-
serving volley. Or Carlos.
Alcaraz.
Sorry, Carlos was
Yeah,
serving you
Alcaraz.
5-all.
Because Alcaraz in this match was also having a lot of success with his kick serve, just like he was at Madrid and at points in this rivalry. That's one area that I remember thinking he definitely has an edge when it comes to not being punished as much on serve that you would think on a court like this, because it's so quick, but it actually does really get up high on Djokovic's backhand a lot of times, and then Alcaraz usually has an easier +1, either a forehand inside in or a serve and volley like he did here, and also throughout the match at various points. So I remember thinking like Djokovic probably has to contend with this long term in the rivalry, and it'll be interesting to see how he does this moving forward, because it seems like a tactic that works pretty well for Alcaraz. I'm curious to hear what you think, Gill.
Yeah, if the court is lively enough, and this one was, and you're absolutely right. This was another match. And in Madrid, it was almost silly. It was like every time Alcaraz hit a kick wide on the ad side, he won the point, like it was automatic. And this match wasn't quite that extreme, but it was certainly a high rate of success. And in this game, on the second break point, he hits a service winner, kick wide. On the third break point, he hits a kick wide, comes in behind it, easy volley winner. And then on the game point, he hits a kick wide that's so nasty it was an ace.
Yeah.
So he saves those 3 break points. Novak then also holds serve, and then we go into a tie break. I think, does Novak get a mini break and a 4-2 at the change of ends? Am I right?
Love all Alcaraz double faults.
Okay.
Yeah.
Level double faults, and that's the sort of 4-2 advantage that therefore Novak has at the change of ends. But then it gets back to 4-all, right, Vansh?
Well, actually, really quickly before that, I remember the point that Djokovic hit to go up. I think it was 2-love. Alcaraz hits this like 2-handed forehand, and he's on the run, and you could see at this point like he's feeling something in his hand. And at that point, I remember thinking, oh no, like this, because this, at this point, you were hoping for that tiebreak to really deliver, even though it had been over 3 hours and 45 minutes. But it ended a little bit anticlimactically, just because I did feel like Alcaraz is cramping. I think that definitely had an effect in terms of, just how the match finished. But I will say, to Alcaraz's credit, from love 3, he did get it to 4-all. So that was some pretty impressive stuff, and some good point shortening skills by him, like almost half volleying some second serves coming in, dropping a forehand volley really short and hitting a winner. Like, I remember that point, but there were also a couple of other occasions where it didn't work. And Djokovic seemed like he had the physical advantage at this point because of the Alcaraz cramps.
I do remember that double-handed shot you're just referring to actually now, and that was curious, and probably was suggesting that something was perhaps not quite right. But I still think that, well, it's still difficult to say how much of a bearing that it did indeed have on the match. What are your sort of thoughts on the tiebreak as a whole, Gill?
I think the hand cramp had a huge bearing, actually.
Okay.
First of all, that was an important rally. It was a 28 shot rally that was really competitive, and it felt like a moment where both players were digging in, and then it kind of ends in a tap out with that forehand. And I think some of the commentary, maybe they were just confused by it, but I don't think it was fully acknowledged what had happened there, where clearly Alcaraz couldn't hit a forehand. And that's how the point was decided for Djokovic. But just watching carefully, Vanch mentioned, yes, Carlitos was looking to shorten points. That was evident. But there were also some other moments where there was a defensive forehand slice, whereas Alcaraz was recovering to the middle of the court. He actually took his right hand kind of off a little bit and just stopped gripping the racket. And then he went to his right to hit the forehand slice, and it drifted long. And you have to think, like, his mind isn't clear in that moment. He's clearly trying to give his right hand some relief. And that's probably the lapse of focus that makes him miss the slice. And then if you look at the match point, this is second serve.
This forehand that you're talking about, where he took his hand off the guy, this was to get the mini break for Djokovic. So this would have been at 4-all, and then now he has
4-all. Right. So that's at 4-all. That's a defensive shot. Sure. I mean, Novak did have an advantage in the point, but Alcaraz still should have put that back in play. And then just looking at the match point, or the championship point, I should say, at 6-4, that's a second serve by Novak. Alcaraz missed it by 15 feet on the forehand. I just don't think that's happening if the hand is okay. So, anticlimactic maybe, but at the same time, it's another amazing ending that nobody could have expected to this match, because we started for the first set and a half again thinking, okay, Alcaraz is going to win this match in straight sets, and the storyline is going to be that in kind of an opposite outcome of what happened in Paris, Novak couldn't deal with the conditions physically. Alcaraz could. That's the match. That's it. And then 3 hours, 40 minutes in, Novak has recovered physically. The sun has gone down. And in the end, the storyline is still partially physical, but Alcaraz has a hand cramp that really compromises his ability to win this third set tiebreak.
Just quickly as well, just coming back to some of the points you've made, the love 1 to love 2 rally that goes, so that's this sort of becomes 2-love to Novak. I've just watched that again, and yeah, Alcaraz doesn't look like he's enjoying the rally, if you like. I mean, it ends up finishing with a mishit forehand, but it seems like there's a couple of backhands he doesn't mind hitting, but there was a couple of forehands in this rally that I'm just watching now, and he doesn't look great on the forehand. He doesn't even want to be in the rally on a forehand. He doesn't want to hit the forehand. He doesn't try to hit many winners. He turns up the notch a little bit, and Djokovic does well on the defense at this particular point. But he's a little uncomfortable for sure. And that return of serve you're talking about on match point, I even saw somebody suggest it might have clipped the net, but of course I know that is, that's checked. By the way, there's also a net cord in that love 1 rally as well that goes the way of Novak in a way, because it was him who hit the net. Vansh. So Novak Djokovic wins. I also think there's something else that Gill just mentioned as well that was quite interesting, is that it was kind of different. There was twists and there was turns and there was differences even in the way that tiebreak, happened, if you like, that, from 3-love and then Carlos comes back in it and then Novak turns the screw, if you like. I still think if we watch that tiebreak in a normal sort of setting, we still go, well, that was interesting. So it was kind of like, it wasn't quite the high octane stuff that we'd seen throughout the third set, but it still just added another layer of intrigue to this. And I guess the sort of final layer in terms of the rivalry that's been building, if we sort of don't go too far forward and look at Turin, is that Novak had sort of arrested any potential slide. And I know it's only one match, but the loss at Wimbledon could have become 2 in a row, and the narratives would have been building, and it would be, whatever happened for the rest of the year, Novak could have, if Carlos then goes on to win the US Open, then Novak could win every tournament for the rest of the year, and it'll still be like, and there'll be people debating who was the best player this year, of course, but that is long gone now, that argument. And arguably this was a turning point for Novak and Carlos in their years. Am I going a bit too far with that one, Vanch?
We'll see if it has any long-term ramifications apart from how this. I definitely think it had to have played a factor on his psyche. But then again, he was playing pretty well until at the U.S. Open up until the Medvedev match. I don't think he was at his very best. The forehand was still going cold on him, like you mentioned earlier, Gill, at points during the U.S. Open. But I think psychologically it was a tough one for him to overcome, just with the chances that he had in that towards the end of the second set. And then just to, we saw the emotion at the end also afterwards for him, really breaking down in tears, understandably, and just, the two of them it was a great trophy ceremony as well, like really well spoken by both of them. I really enjoyed that. It was kind of fitting of the whole rivalry as a whole. And then you kind of do wonder if that took a toll on him just psychologically more than anything else. So of course he did also have some injuries later on in the in the season, like with his lower back, and then also at times with his foot as well with the tendonitis. So and then of course he's playing Novak on those really fast indoor hard courts in the ATP finals where I mean Djokovic just played two of his most spectacular matches, arguably up there with any of the two matches in a row in a big event that he's ever played in his career. So but up until that point, I mean, this rivalry, like almost every single clash, right from Madrid, and even the first two sets that we saw at Roland Garros, I mean, this is something like really, really special because we've never seen this before, where there's like a 16+ year age gap between two players, and it's like the older guy is not really slowing down. So it's, I mean, I'm no like Steve Flink or Joel Drucker or Richard Evans, but like so my memory doesn't go that far back, but like the earliest that I can think of is like Steffi Graf and Martina Navratilova. Like, they finished at 9-all in their careers in their head-to-head, and it's just going to be so fascinating to see where all the twists and turns come in the larger picture as far as the rivalry goes. And they've played each other once now on basically every surface, if you count, I mean, altitude clay, sea level clay. So the 5 meetings, and 3-2 for Novak. But it's pretty interesting to see also like what's shaking up. And I also wonder if Sinner playing so well in the second half of the year and after the US Open, if that really takes some pressure off of Carlos for next year. And because not as many people are maybe thinking about him as a lot of people are saying, oh, like Sinner is the second favorite for the Australian Open, and like Sinner is the one who has a chance of overtaking Alcaraz next year, and etc. And I wonder if that sort of limelight on Sinner is actually going to help Carlos deal with the expectations.
Yeah, maybe. All right, Gil, just give us some final thoughts on either the rivalry or the match, a few months on. And I guess we're looking forward to plenty more of this in 2024.
Yeah, 100%. It almost feels like, well, also the thing about this year was there was like a long period of time where we weren't getting Djokovic Alcaraz.
Yeah,
notably,
I forgot about that.
Notably we weren't. They kept taking turns being absent, and that's part of I think that hurt Alcaraz at Roland Garros. He was so hyped up at the prospect of playing Djokovic, he got too hyped up. The way it twisted and turned with Novak winning at Roland Garros and Alcaraz winning at Wimbledon, nobody would have predicted it going that way. It would have been more feasible that one player wins both than they splitting 1-1 in that manner. This match in Cincy was so unforgettable. I think just incredibly gratifying for Novak. I think it was a very gratifying win. He clearly was actually, used the loss at Wimbledon in a productive manner for himself, which to me isn't surprising. I mean, he's done it all his career. He's battled against greatness, and that doesn't just push him, it pushes anybody in Novak's position. So like the fact that Alcaraz beat him in a 5-set Wimbledon final, of course he was going to take that and run with it, be excited by the challenge of reversing that result. So that was certainly the case. Returning to U.S. soil, it had a little bit extra meaning. That said, it was the best match Alcaraz played all summer long on the hard courts. It was his best performance. So I actually think it was a positive heading into the U.S. Open that Alcaraz could look at that level, especially in the third set, and be like, okay, my game's in a good spot. I'm ready to go for this U.S. Open title. And then he was a little bit shell-shocked by by what went down in the Medvedev match, and that was its own thing. But I think it set up both players very nicely for a U.S. Open run. We just didn't get that U.S. Open final because Medvedev played great in the semi.
Yeah. Indeed. Wonderful. Thanks for you both coming on today, Vansh and Gill. Make sure you check out both of these guys on Twitter and various other social medias, no doubt, but also on various other channels. I know, of course, Vansh has the Iga and Carlos show. So that's pretty relevant to today's episode. And also Gill with his Monday match analysis, 3 bunch of other stuff. Am I missing any other of your titles, Gill?
There's the mailbag, there's other content, but it's all on either 3, the tennis show, or the Gill Gross YouTube channel.
Gill, you might get one more viewer, but I doubt it, because probably my viewers are probably not too dissimilar to yours. We've just got 1 or 2 less. That's all. But basically, however many we have and however many you have, these are yours as well. So you might get another viewer, you might get another subscriber, but I can't guarantee it.
There's always some, John.
Yeah,
but it's always a pleasure coming on and go through these matches. I remember doing the same thing last year, and it is fun revisiting these things. I love the series that you do here.
Cool, me too as well. And of course, Vansh, I'll be seeing you again very soon. We've dispelled any myths about Gill being a Liverpool FC fan as well.
Are you happy about that? Is that a relief?
I'm a Manchester United fan. I mean, I've got a book here that I've written that's in the background, and that's part of the reason I thought of it. Plus, Manchester United are playing Liverpool tomorrow in what could end up being a horror show, but we'll perhaps address that some other time, just because I think Liverpool are the hot favourites. Anyway, big thanks once again to you both, and everybody else. Thanks for tuning in, and you know the drill. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.